My name is Ethan Walker. I'm 47, used to be a corporate negotiator, the guy people called to fix impossible deals. Suits, polished shoes, a downtown office with my name on the glass. Then, 6 months ago, a truck ran a red light and my world ended. My daughter Emily was 6 wild curls, bright eyes, always running. Now she can't move her legs at all. Doctors said irreversible. Since then, my life has shrunk to hospital visits, therapy sessions, and carrying her everywhere like glass. I thought I'd lost hope completely, until I met a boy with duct-taped boots sitting outside the Children's Medical Center, and he said he could heal her. What would you do if a kid with duct-taped boots told you he could heal your child? Would you laugh, curse, keep walking, or would you stop just long enough to let hope sneak in and make a mess of your heart? I never thought I'd be the kind of man to listen to street kids with wild claims. I spent my whole life learning how to see through bullshit, how to hear the pitch before the words even formed. But that morning in Birmingham, Alabama, something in me paused. It was cold, not enough to snow, but the air burned the inside of your nose and turned your breath into clouds that vanished as quick as they came. The sun hadn't fully risen. Everything was tinted with a bruised blue-gray, like the world hadn't decided to wake up yet. Cars lined both sides of 7th Avenue exhaust, curling up into the sky. People moved fast, clutching coffee cups, eyes glassy and distant shoulders hunched against the cold, and whatever news waited for them inside those walls. I carried Emily in my arms, her pink blanket wrapped around her like a shield, curls spilling over my forearm, her small face tucked against my chest. She didn't say a word. She never really spoke anymore. 6 months ago, she was climbing trees, scraping knees, racing cousins down grassy hills in her sparkly sneakers. Then came the accident. Now, she just watched the sky, like she didn't want to see the world from down here anymore. I walked through the revolving doors of Children's Medical Center, trying not to think about the hours ahead, the fluorescent lights, the smell of bleach and burnt coffee. The words from therapists I'd memorized like scripture, managing expectations, long road, miracles take time. I didn't see him at first. No one did. He sat on a flattened cardboard box near the entrance knees, pulled up a worn-out sketchbook balanced on his thighs. His coat swallowed him, sleeves rolled twice at the wrists. One boot had silver duct tape crisscrossed over the toe. A red-knit beanie was pulled down low, covering his ears, his hair curling out in messy tufts. He wasn't begging, wasn't holding out a cup or sign. Just sitting there, pencil scratching quietly as the world rushed by him, like water around a stubborn stone. His name, I'd later learn, was Jaden, but right then, to me, he was just a kid on the sidewalk, invisible in plain sight. And I was a father carrying my broken daughter, too tired to notice that hope sometimes comes in the smallest, strangest packages. My name is Ethan Walker. I'm 47 years old, and most days I feel every minute of it. Before all this, before life split into before and after, I used to think of myself as a man with answers. People paid me for that, my certainty. I was the guy who walked into a conference room with my sleeves rolled up, tie loosened just enough to look approachable, but still in control. Contracts, negotiations, mergers, settlements. I didn't blink. I built my life on logic, numbers, strategies. Everything lined up neat in columns black and white. Then came Emily. Emily Rose Walker, 6 years old. If you ever saw her before the accident, you'd remember her. She was that kid who couldn't walk anywhere. She skipped, danced, cartwheeled down hallways, twirled in grocery store aisles, until strangers smiled despite themselves. Her hair was wild and golden, always slipping out of hair ties I'd fumble to redo before school drop-offs. Her knees were never clean. Dirt embedded into scabs, tiny bruises, blooming like purple flowers on her shins. She'd come home every day with new stories. Daddy, I raced Micah today and I won. Or Daddy, look, I climbed the monkey bars all the way to the top. She was fearless. God, she was fearless. Sometimes I'd watch her sleep at night, arms thrown above her head, hair spread across the pillow like spilled honey, and I'd think, please let me keep her safe. Let her always be this free. And then, one rainy Thursday evening, everything changed. We were coming home from piano lessons. She sat in the back seat humming some Taylor Swift song under her breath, feet kicking against her booster chair. The roads were slick with drizzle. The light turned green and I pulled into the intersection. I didn't even see the truck. Just a flash of white headlights, a horn blaring too late, the sound of metal folding in on itself like an empty soda can. I remember the silence after impact. It wasn't real silence. The car alarm screamed, the engine hissed, my own breath rasped in my chest, but in my mind it was silent. I turned around. Her eyes were open, staring at nothing. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. Blood trickled from her hairline, curling around her ear like red vines. In the hospital, they told me her spinal cord was damaged, irreversible, paraplegia. Words that shattered my world in an instant. I signed forms I couldn't read, nodded at doctors I couldn't hear. All I saw was her tiny body swallowed up in blankets, tubes snaking out of her arms, and those eyes blank, shocked, hollow. Now, every morning before dawn, I carry her to the SUV parked in our driveway, her legs wrapped in a faded pink blanket, her curls spilling over my forearm, her cheek pressed to my chest like she's asleep. But she's not asleep. She just doesn't want to see the world from down here anymore. She used to tell me, Daddy, when I grow up, I want to run faster than everyone. Now, she barely speaks. Sometimes she hums to herself, soft and tuneless. Sometimes she just stares at the sky through the window as I drive like she's looking for something up there that Earth can't give her anymore. I thought I knew what it meant to fight for her. I thought it meant appointments, MRIs, specialized therapy, experimental treatments I couldn't really afford, but would sell my soul to pay for. I didn't think it meant listening to a kid sitting on cardboard outside a hospital. A kid with duct tape on his boots and eyes too old for his face. But that was before Jaden spoke. Before he said the words that cracked something open inside me I thought was sealed shut forever. I didn't see him the first few times we came. Or maybe I did, but I didn't really see him. Just another kid sitting on the sidewalk tucked against the revolving doors of the Children's Medical Center. People avoided looking at him the way people always avoid looking at kids like that. Kids with duct tape on their boots and jackets 2 sizes too big. Invisible in plain sight. But that morning, as I shifted Emily in my arms to push through the heavy glass doors, I heard a voice. Small, quiet, but so certain it stopped me mid-step. "Sir," he said, "I can make her walk again." For a second, I thought I'd imagined it. I turned my head. There he was, knees pulled up to his chest, sketchbook balanced on them pencil, still in his hand, like he hadn't even paused drawing to speak. His eyes were dark, steady, too old for his round baby face. I stared at him, blinking against the cold. "What did you just say?" He didn't flinch, didn't smile, just repeated calm and clear, "I can make her walk again." I felt my chest tighten. 100 angry words gathered in my throat, ready to spit out at him. "Who the hell do you think you are? You think this is a joke? A scam?" But when I looked at him, really looked, I saw no mischief. No sales pitch, no hope or doubt, just quiet certainty like he was telling me the sky was blue or winter was cold. A fact. "That's not funny, kid," I snapped, tightening my grip around Emily. She stirred in my arms, pressing her face deeper into my coat. "I'm not joking," he said softly. Something in his voice made my anger wobble. It wasn't childish or pleading, it was still. like talking to an old man in a 9-year-old body. I studied him closer. His coat sleeves were rolled up to keep his hands free. One of his boots was split across the toe duct tape holding it together. His beanie was pulled low over his ears, dark curls peeking out. Hanging from the collar of his shirt was a pair of cracked glasses, the lens chipped but taped back into place. I felt disgust rise in me, not at him, but at myself. At the part of me that wanted to believe him. I turned away. "Come on, Emily," I murmured, shifting her higher against my chest. I walked through the doors without another word. But inside, while therapists poked at her legs and neurologists talked about nerve pathways and muscle atrophy, all I could hear was that boy's voice echoing in my skull. "I can make her walk again." His words stuck to my ribs like a stubborn cough. No matter how many professional opinions I heard that day, no matter how many sympathetic smiles I nodded at, I couldn't shake it. I kept seeing his face calm, still unwavering, and wondering how a child with nothing could say something so impossible with so much certainty. By the time Emily's last appointment ended, the sun was sitting lower in the sky. I carried her back out through the revolving doors, my arms aching, my heart heavier than when we came in. The cold slapped me awake as I stepped onto the sidewalk. And there he was, Jaden, sitting in the same spot, sketchbook open on his knees, pencil scratching quietly. But this time, he wasn't drawing. He was watching us, waiting. I should have kept walking, should have buckled Emily into her car seat, driven home, and forgotten the whole damn thing. Instead, I turned to him. "You again?" I muttered, walking closer. He looked up at me, calm as ever. "Why would you say something like that?" I asked, my voice low and sharp. "You think this is funny? You don't even know her." He shook his head slowly. "No, sir, I don't need to know her to help." I stared at him, chest burning. "You're what, 9, 10? You're just a kid sitting outside a hospital with duct tape on your shoes. What could you possibly know about helping someone like my daughter?" He lowered his gaze, fingers tracing the edge of his sketchbook. When he spoke, his voice was so quiet I almost didn't hear. My mama used to help people walk again. She was a physical therapist. She taught me stuff. She said the body remembers even when it forgets. I opened my mouth to snap back, but nothing came out. I just stood there staring at this child with taped-up boots and cracked glasses, wondering what the hell kind of world I was living in, where my only flicker of hope came from a boy on the sidewalk. I shifted Emily in my arms. Her eyelids fluttered open, and for a brief second she looked at him. He smiled softly at her, and something in me cracked. "Fine," I said, my voice rough. "You want to waste your time, kid? Meet us at Harrington Park tomorrow. Noon, don't be late." He nodded once, like a soldier receiving orders. "I'll be there." I carried Emily to the car, my chest tight with anger, confusion, and something dangerously close to hope. I didn't sleep that night. After I tucked Emily into bed, I sat in my office, staring at the wall of framed degrees behind my desk. Juris Doctor MBA certificates of excellence lined up in dark walnut frames like silent proof of the man I used to be. A man who could fix things. A man who always found a way. But none of those papers meant a damn thing now. Not when my little girl couldn't move her legs. I tried to read, tried to work, tried to care about the contracts scattered across my desk. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw him. Jaden. His small face half hidden under that red beanie, his eyes dark and still. I heard his voice over and over. "I can make her walk again." It wasn't the words themselves that haunted me. God knows I've heard empty promises before. It was the way he said it. Calm, certain. Like hope wasn't hope at all, it was just fact. At around midnight, I walked down the hall to Emily's room. She was curled on her side blankets, bunched around her waist, one arm draped over her stuffed fox. Her breathing was soft, almost silent. I sat on the edge of her bed and brushed a strand of hair off her cheek. She stirred, but didn't wake. "Hey, baby," I whispered, my voice catching in my throat. "Daddy's gonna fix this, okay? Somehow." But even as I said it, the old anger rose in me. Because I couldn't fix it. No matter how many doctors we saw, no matter how much I paid, I couldn't force her spine to heal. I couldn't force her legs to move. All I could do was carry her. Everywhere, every day, for the rest of her life. I pressed my palms into my eyes until colors danced behind them. Then I stood and left the room before my tears woke her. The next morning was colder than the day before. I bundled Emily up in her thickest sweater and wrapped her pink blanket tight around her legs. As I carried her to the car, her head rested against my chest. She didn't say anything. She hadn't spoken much in months. "Where are we going today, Daddy?" She finally asked, her voice small and scratchy from sleep. I hesitated, fumbling for words. Just somewhere different. She didn't ask again. We drove in silence through Birmingham's waking streets, past shuttered shops and corner stores with their neon signs flickering to life. As I turned onto Harrington Avenue, my stomach twisted with something I didn't want to name. Hope? Fear? Both. Harrington Park wasn't anything special. A cracked basketball court, 2 swings with rusted chains, a patch of grass that called itself a soccer field if you squinted hard enough. On Sunday mornings, it was usually empty, but not today. Jaden was already there. He sat on the bench under the big oak tree near the swings, his small frame bundled in that same oversized coat. At his feet sat a faded green gym bag. Next to him on the bench was a neatly folded towel. He wasn't sketching this time. His notebook was tucked away. He was just sitting there waiting as if he'd known all along I would come. I pulled the SUV to the curb and killed the engine. For a moment, I didn't move. My hands rested on the steering wheel, knuckles white. What the hell was I doing here? Trusting a child with duct-taped boots to heal my daughter? Had I finally lost my mind? Then I heard a soft voice from the back seat. "Daddy, is that the boy from the hospital?" I turned. Emily's eyes were wide and curious, her face lit with something I hadn't seen in months. Interest, hope. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Yeah, baby, that's him." She didn't say anything, but she didn't look away. And that right there was enough to make me open my door. I stepped out into the cold morning air, walked around to unbuckle her, and lifted her out gently. As I carried her toward the boy under the oak tree, I felt something shift deep inside my chest. A loosening, a cracking. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just carrying her body. I was carrying a seed of hope. Small, fragile, dangerous, but alive. He stood when we approached. Jaden. In the pale morning light, he looked even smaller than I remembered, the oversized coat swallowing him whole. But his eyes were steady, calm, that same quiet certainty that haunted me all night. He greeted us politely. I didn't bother responding. I was too busy scanning him up and down for any sign this was a prank or scam. But there was nothing. Just a kid with duct-taped boots, cracked lens glasses hanging from his collar, and a gym bag at his feet. Emily peeked out from my shoulder. He smiled at her and said her name. When she whispered, "How do you know my name?" he just said she'd told him yesterday and he remembered stuff. I set her down gently on the folded towel he'd laid out. The cold seeped through my knees as I knelt beside her, arms crossed, heart hammering. So what now? My voice was sharper than intended, brittle with skepticism I'd built my life on. Jaden ignored my tone. He crouched by his gym bag, pulling out fuzzy socks, a tennis ball, cocoa butter, and a steaming cloth bundle. When I asked what all that was, he said simply, It was stuff his mama used the rice pack for heat to loosen tight muscles the ball for pressure points. Emily watched his every move. He unwrapped the warm rice pack, steam curling around his fingers, and asked if it was okay to put it on her legs. "It won't hurt. If anything feels weird, you tell me to stop." "Deal." She looked at me, eyes questioning. My chest tightened. "You can try," I said quietly. "Just be careful." He nodded and laid the bundle across her thighs. She flinched, then relaxed, whispering that it felt good. He said good and waited, letting the heat sink in before moving her legs gently, small rotations at hip and knee, side to side, up and down. His hands were tiny but precise, confident. I watched every movement, ready to pull her away if needed. But he didn't falter. Occasionally, he glanced at her face to check her reactions. "You ever do this before?" I asked, suspicion dripping. He didn't look up. My mama took me to shelters after school, helped veterans and folks who couldn't afford therapy. I carried her bag. The words landed heavy. "And she taught you this stuff?" "Yeah. She said the body don't always need fancy, just attention." He tapped lightly on Emily's knee. "You feel that?" She stared at the sky, then shook her head. "No." He didn't sigh or pity her like therapists did, just nodded and kept going. As he worked, he talked softly about cartoons, sock colors, and dragon names. At first, her answers were quiet. Then she asked him questions back about school, why he wasn't there. He paused, pressing gently into her calf. "My mama got sick. Then she passed, been figuring things out since." She whispered, "I'm sorry." He smiled faintly. "Thanks." I watched them, something tight and unfamiliar curling in my chest, guilt, shame, hope, all braided together. After about 30 minutes, he tapped her ankle again. You feel that she blinked, a little, like pressure. He glanced at me. "That's good. She sometimes says that during therapy," I muttered. He nodded. "Yeah. But therapy rooms got machines. Machines scare kids, tighten them up." But here he gestured at the trees. The empty park, the pale sun breaking through gray clouds feels different. I didn't respond. Just watched his small hands moving with quiet precision, like he was tuning an instrument only he could hear. When we left, Emily's cheeks were flushed pink from cold and warmth. As I lifted her back into the SUV, she leaned close and whispered, "Daddy, he's nice." I didn't say anything. I buckled her in, closed the door, and stood for a moment watching Jaden fold his towel with careful, deliberate movements. For the first time in a long time, the steel door I'd welded shut around my heart shifted just a fraction. And through that crack, something dangerous slipped in. Hope. We went back the next Sunday. I told myself it was just to humor him, that it was just another wasted half hour in a long line of wasted hours. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was, for the first time in months, Emily asked me if we were going. She woke up before her alarm, hair tangled, rubbing sleep from her eyes, whispering, "Are we going to see Jaden today?" And just like that, it wasn't about miracles anymore. It was about her wanting something. Anything. Jaden was already there when we arrived. Same bench under the oak tree, same duct-taped boots, same small gym bag sitting at his feet. But this time, something was different. He wasn't just waiting, he was ready. "Morning," he said as we approached. He gave Emily a small wave. "Hi, Em." She grinned. I hadn't seen that smile in so long, it hit me like a punch to the ribs. He laid out the towel and unpacked his supplies with the same care as before: warm rice pack, cocoa butter, tennis ball. But today, he added something new, a thick rubber band loop. "What's that for?" I asked, suspicion still clinging to my voice like old oil. "Resistance training," he said simply. "Helps remind the muscles they're supposed to work." He slipped the band around her ankles. and showed her how to push her feet apart against the tension. At first, nothing happened. Her toes curled, but her legs stayed still. Jaden didn't flinch, didn't sigh, didn't say, "Try harder," like so many therapists did. He just nodded. "That's okay. Your brain's looking for the right path. It's like walking through a crowded hallway. Takes time to find the open space." Emily giggled softly. "Like when I go to lunch at school." "Exactly," he said, smiling. "You just gotta push through." I watched them, arms crossed against the cold heart, twisting in ways I couldn't explain. Every Sunday after that, we came back. Same time, same place. Jaden taught her new exercises each week, rolling the tennis ball under her feet to wake up nerve pathways, pressing into pressure points behind her knees to loosen locked muscles, stretching her hips, rotating her ankles, massaging the arches of her feet with cocoa butter to soften scar tissue. Sometimes I joined in, kneeling beside them, holding her knees steady as Jaden guided her feet outward. At first, my hands trembled. I was terrified of hurting her. But Jaden would glance up at me and nod, calm and silent, and somehow that steadied me too. One morning, halfway through a session, Jaden tapped her ankle again. Feel that Emily blinked, and for the first time her eyes widened. I think so. It's like a tickle. Inside. My breath caught in my chest. Jaden just smiled softly. "Good. That means your nerves are talking again." When we got home that day, I carried her inside and set her in her chair by the window. She was quiet for a long time, staring out at the magnolia tree in our front yard. Then, in a small voice, she whispered, "Daddy, I think I'm getting better." I couldn't speak. I just knelt in front of her and pressed my forehead to her knees, holding back tears that burned like acid behind my eyes. In the evenings after dinner, I found myself thinking about Jaden, wondering where he slept, what he ate, whether his coat was warm enough at night. One evening after I tucked Emily in, I sat in my office, scrolling through local shelters and outreach programs looking for his name. But there was nothing. It was like he didn't exist anywhere except on that park bench on Sunday mornings. The next week, I brought him a sandwich, turkey and cheddar on sourdough. I didn't say anything when I handed it to him, just placed it next to his gym bag while he set up. He didn't thank me, not with words, but he smiled at Emily that morning like someone who felt seen for the first time in a long time. We kept coming, Sunday after Sunday. I watched my daughter's legs twitch. I watched her toes wiggle her feet, flex her knees shift. Each small victory was a spark in the dark cave we'd been living in for months, and every spark lit something inside me I thought had died forever. Hope. Dangerous, stubborn, impossible hope. Jaden never promised miracles, never once said she will walk again. He just showed up, laid out his towel, unpacked his tools, and said, "Let's try." And for the first time, trying felt like enough. It happened on the fourth Sunday. We pulled up to Harrington Park like always. The sun was out that morning, bright enough to warm the cracked basketball court, and a soft breeze rattled the oak leaves above Jaden's bench. I remember thinking it felt like a good day, like maybe we were finally turning a corner. But as soon as I opened the back door, I knew something was wrong. Emily wouldn't look at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed lashes clumped together. She'd been crying. I asked her what was wrong, trying to keep my voice calm, but she didn't answer. She just stared straight ahead, fists clenched in her blanket. Jaden stood up as we approached. His small face was serious brow, furrowed under his red-knit beanie. He greeted her softly, "Morning, Em," but she didn't respond. I set her down on the towel beside his gym bag and crouched next to her, urging her to talk to me, asking what happened. Her chin trembled as she whispered so quietly I had to lean in to hear. Telling me she tried to move her legs that morning, tried so hard, but nothing happened. Tears welled up again and spilled down her cheeks as she choked out that it was pointless. My heart cracked open raw and bleeding. I looked at Jaden helplessly, anger bubbling under my ribs, desperate for someone to blame. I said sharply that she'd been frustrated all weekend, suggesting maybe we should skip today. But Jaden didn't back down. He crouched until his eyes were level with hers, his voice quiet, calm, steady. He asked if she thought he never got tired, never wanted to give up, and told her about sitting in a shelter crying when his mama couldn't afford medicine, and he had to just watch her get sicker and sicker. His voice wavered for the first time, just a hairline crack, but he didn't look away from her. Emily sniffled, staring at him through tears, as he told her she was allowed to be mad that he got mad too. But if she stopped now, the part of her that wanted to walk might stop trying too. She looked down at her lap, silent tears dripping onto the pink blanket. For a long moment, none of us moved. The breeze rustled dry leaves across the pavement. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The world kept turning indifferent to the moment, breaking both our hearts. Then, in the smallest voice, she whispered that she was scared. Something inside me snapped. The words hit like a sledgehammer to my chest. My brave little girl, who never cried out in pain, never complained, never admitted fear, finally said she was scared. Jaden didn't flinch. He reached out and laid his small, rough hand over hers, admitting he was scared too, his voice trembling now, but saying scared didn't mean stop. It just meant she was close to something big. She blinked at him, tears still falling, but her breathing slowed. Her shoulders relaxed by a fraction, and she whispered, "Okay, let's try again." Jaden nodded once like a general giving orders before battle. He gently unwrapped her legs from the blanket, placed the warm rice pack over her thighs, and waited. Then, with infinite patience, he guided her through each movement. No extra words this time. No small talk about cartoons or school lunches. Just his presence, his hands, his steady, unbreakable faith. I moved closer too, held her knee when he asked, pressed her toes down into the towel when he said she needed to feel grounded. My chest burned with unshed tears, but my hands stayed firm, strong. Because if that kid could be strong for her, so could I. 30 minutes passed like that. Silent, focused, breath and movement and trembling muscles. Then it happened. He tapped her ankle again, asking if she felt that. Her brow tightened as she inhaled sharply, saying she thought she could move it. He told her to try, and slowly her foot shifted. Not just a toe this time. Her whole foot slid forward across the towel, stiff and shaky, but it moved. I let out a sound I didn't recognize, half laugh, half sob. My vision blurred. I blinked hard and saw Jaden staring at her, a small smile breaking across his face like sunrise. I choked out for her to do it again, and she did. A tiny movement, but hers. When I lifted her back into the SUV that afternoon, her face was different. Still pale, still tired. But behind her eyes burned something fierce. Something unbreakable. Hope. Real hope. The dangerous kind. The kind that makes men like me fall to their knees in silent prayer, even when we don't believe in anything anymore. As I buckled her seatbelt, she reached up and cupped my cheek with her small, trembling hand, whispering with tears and wonder that she moved her foot. And for the first time since the accident, I let myself believe that one day my little girl might stand up and run again, because of a boy with duct-taped boots who refused to let her give up. That night, after Emily fell asleep, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the glow of the TV without really seeing it. Some late-night news anchor was droning on about city council budgets and rising crime rates. None of it mattered. Nothing felt real except the memory of her foot sliding forward across that towel, the way her eyes lit up like someone flipped a switch inside her chest. I didn't know how long I sat there before I finally stood and walked down the dark hallway to her room. I pushed the door open as quietly as I could. The moonlight streamed through the curtains, bathing her in silver. She lay curled on her side, one arm wrapped around her stuffed fox, her tiny chest rising and falling with each slow, even breath. I sank down into the armchair in the corner and watched her sleep. My little girl, my baby, 6 years old, and life had already handed her a mountain to climb. I thought about Jaden, about the way he moved calm and sure, like he carried some secret the rest of us didn't know. About the way he never promised miracles, only effort. About the way he said, scared don't mean stop. It just means you're close to something big. Something inside me cracked open wider than before. For months, I'd been living in a world carved out of grief and anger. Anger at the driver who hit us. Anger at God if he was even up there. Anger at myself for not seeing the truck in time. But underneath all that anger was something colder, numbness, a deadness I didn't want to name. Because if I let myself feel anything, I was terrified it would break me completely. But watching Emily that day, seeing her foot move, seeing Jaden smile at her like he'd known it was possible all along, it did something to me. It scared the hell out of me because it felt like hope. Real hope. And hope is dangerous when you've spent so long learning to live without it. I sat there in that dark room, listening to the soft whir of her breathing machine, and realized something that made my chest tighten. I didn't want to be numb anymore. I wanted to feel again, even if it hurt, even if it broke me. Because watching her try, watching her fight for every millimeter of movement, I knew she deserved a father who wasn't just carrying her body through this life. She deserved a father who carried her hope, too. The next morning, I found Jaden sitting on the curb outside the hospital. Same spot, same cardboard box, same sketchbook balanced on his knees. But this time, instead of walking past him, I sat down beside him. He didn't look up at first. His pencil kept moving across the page, sketching something I couldn't see. "Why do you do this?" I asked softly. He paused, then looked up at me with those dark, too old eyes. "Do what?" This I said, gesturing at his notebook, his taped-up boots, his worn-out coat. "Help people. Help her. You don't even know us." He shrugged, glancing back down at his drawing. "Because it's what my mama would have done." A silence fell between us. Cars roared down 7th Avenue. A woman pushed a stroller past, giving us a cautious glance. Somewhere nearby, an ambulance siren wailed. The city kept moving indifferent to the small moment happening on its cracked sidewalk. Finally, I cleared my throat. You ever need a place to sleep?" He didn't respond right away, just kept tracing his pencil over the page, shading in shadows I couldn't see. Then he said, without looking up, "Sometimes." I nodded, slowly, staring at the scuffed tips of my dress shoes. "You know we've got a guest room. It's nothing fancy, but it's warm. And Emily, she'd probably like having you around." He looked up, then, eyes wide, mouth opening like he wanted to speak, but no words came out. "You don't have to decide now," I added, quickly feeling awkward under his gaze. "Just think about it." For the first time since I'd met him, he looked like a kid. Just a 9-year-old boy, small and fragile and stunned by kindness he didn't know how to accept. "Okay," he whispered finally, "I'll think about it." I stood, brushing road grit off my pants, and looked down at him. "We'll be at Harrington Park again next Sunday, noon." He nodded, eyes lowered back to his sketchbook. As I walked away, something shifted inside my chest. The numbness didn't disappear. The anger didn't vanish. But underneath it all, I felt something flicker. Not just hope, something else. Change. Because for the first time since that truck ran a red light and shattered our lives, I didn't feel like a man running from the world. I felt like a man running toward something. toward healing, toward my daughter, toward the boy with duct-taped boots who reminded me that broken things could still carry light. By the 5th Sunday, people had started to notice. It began with a nurse from Children's Medical Center. She was walking her Labrador through Harrington Park when she saw Emily under the oak tree, cheeks flushed with effort, as Jaden guided her foot across the towel. She slowed, watched them for a long moment, then wiped at her eyes before tugging her dog's leash and moving on. Later that week, over lunch, she told a therapist friend that Reeves girl, she's moving her foot again. There's this boy helping her, just a kid, but it looked real. The next Sunday, 2 other families were waiting by the oak tree. One was a mother with a little boy in a pediatric walker, legs thin as pencils. The other was a teenage girl with long braids, her right side limp from a stroke the year before. Her father stood behind her wheelchair looking uncomfortable and hopeful all at once. Jaden paused when he saw them. He looked up at me, eyebrows raised in silent question. I crouched next to him. "You don't have to do this," I whispered. "Emily needs her time with you." But he shook his head. "She can watch today. It'll be good for her." So that morning, Emily sat in her wheelchair blanket, wrapped tight around her legs, and watched. Jaden worked with the little boy first. He showed his mother how to warm the rice pack just right, how to roll a tennis ball under his arches to wake dormant nerves. He spoke softly, calmly, with a quiet confidence that made them believe him. Then he turned to the teenage girl. Her father started to protest, saying she was tired, that this wouldn't help. Jaden didn't flinch. "She's stronger than you think," he said simply. Then he knelt, held her limp hand in both of his, and began gently stretching her wrist and fingers, massaging each knuckle with cocoa butter. On the way home that afternoon, Emily was quiet for a long time. Halfway down 7th Avenue, she whispered, "Daddy, I like watching him help people." I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Yeah," she nodded. "It makes me feel, I don't know, like I'm part of something good." The next Sunday, 5 families showed up. Then 11. Parents brought lawn chairs and blankets. Someone from a local church passed out coffee and bagels. A retired pastor rolled up in his old Chevy and set out folding chairs for those who couldn't sit on the grass. Jaden moved from child to child, teenager to teenager, showing each family simple techniques: towel stretches, rubber band resistance, rice pack heat therapy. He spoke to each kid directly, never down to them, never over them, just with them. To a boy with cerebral palsy, he tapped his knee and said, "You're not broken. You're just learning a different way to be strong." I watched him work week after week, my arms crossed against the cold morning breeze, chest aching with pride, gratitude, wonder. One Sunday, a woman from the Birmingham Post came with a camera and a notepad. She asked if Emily was my daughter. I said yes. She asked his name. I told her softly, "Jaden." She asked if he charged for this. I shook my head. He doesn't ask for anything. She looked over at him, tears brimming. "He's just a kid," she whispered. "Yeah," I said, voice thick. "But he's the best damn healer I've ever met." Her story ran under the headline, "9-year-old with a gift helps dozens heal in City Park." By the next week, a doctor offered to mentor him. A nonprofit wanted to fund therapy equipment. Someone volunteered free tutoring to get him back in school. But Jaden never bragged, never changed. Every Sunday, he laid out his towel the same way, wore the same duct-taped boots, started each session checking in with Emily before moving on to anyone else. Because that's who he was. The boy who showed up again and again, not to be noticed or praised, but simply to help, to heal, to remind broken people that they still carried light inside them. It happened on the 9th Sunday. The air was warmer that morning, with sunlight filtering through thin clouds. Emily sat quietly in the back seat as I drove to Harrington Park, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her pink blanket. She didn't hum or ask questions like usual. She just stared out the window with a focused, almost fierce look in her eyes. When we pulled up, Jaden was already there, sitting under the oak tree, his gym bag at his feet, towel folded neatly beside him. He stood when he saw us, eyes bright. "Morning, Em," he said softly. "Morning," she whispered back. He knelt in front of her, unwrapped the blanket from her legs, and began massaging her calves with cocoa butter. Around us, the usual small crowd gathered, parents with their kids, volunteers setting out chairs, someone passing around coffee and paper cups. But all I could see was my daughter and the boy kneeling before her like a healer from some forgotten time. "Same as before," Jaden murmured. "We help you stand. You do